Elderly woman fills roof with fans. And the reason is astounding. Mrs. Dorothy Campbell was looking out her kitchen window when she heard the first nasty comment from the neighbors about the equipment she had installed on the roof of her wooden house. At 72, she knew people didn't understand her ways, but this time the situation was different. It had all started 3 weeks earlier, when her grandson Christopher had another asthma attack that nearly sent him to the hospital. The 8-year-old boy couldn't breathe properly inside the house, especially on the hottest and most humid days in Palmwood Springs, a small town in the countryside of Kentucky. "Grandma, I can't breathe right," Christopher would whisper every time he came to visit her on weekends. Dorothy would watch her grandson struggling for air and feel her heart tighten. The boy was thin, with brown hair and big eyes that seemed to plead for help every time an attack began. She tried everything. She opened all the windows, turned on the old living room fan, but nothing seemed to work completely. "My boy, Grandma is going to fix this," she promised, stroking the boy's hair. It was on one of those stifling afternoons that Dorothy made a decision that would change her life forever. She had some savings tucked under her mattress, money she had saved over the years by selling treats at the town fair. Without a second thought, she took all the money and went to Mr. Harold's electrical supply store. "Mrs. Dorothy, how many fans do you want to buy?" asked Mr. Harold, incredulous. 12, she replied firmly. "The strongest ones you have." The shopkeeper tried to dissuade her, explaining it would be very expensive and that she didn't need so many units. But Dorothy was determined. She knew her Christopher needed an environment with constant, efficient air circulation. The following week, Dorothy's simple wooden house was unrecognizable. She had called Mr. Thomas, the town electrician, to install the 12 industrial fans on the roof. The man did the work but didn't hide his bewilderment. "Mrs. Dorothy, with all due respect, but don't you think you're overdoing it?" asked Thomas as he connected the wires. "Thomas, when you have a little grandson who can't breathe, then you come talk to me about overdoing it," she replied, watching every move the electrician made. When Christopher arrived the following Saturday for his usual visit, his eyes widened at the transformation. The fans were all running, creating a constant stream of air that circulated throughout the house. "Grandma, what's that noise?" asked the boy, covering his ears. "It's the sound of your breathing getting better, my love," said Dorothy with a smile. To everyone's surprise, the boy spent the entire weekend without a single asthma attack. He played in the yard, chased the chickens, and even helped his grandmother make sugar bread without showing any symptoms. "Mum, what's this story about filling the house with fans?" questioned Richard, Dorothy's son and Christopher's father, when he came to pick up the boy on Sunday. Richard was a serious 45-year-old man who worked as a manager at a clothing store in town. He always worried too much about what others thought and was mortified when he saw the amount of equipment on his mother's roof. "Son, Christopher didn't have a single attack this weekend," explained Dorothy. "That was a coincidence, Mum. You spent all your savings on something pointless," retorted Richard, visibly irritated. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Jennifer, wife of Richard and mother of Christopher, was also not at all pleased with the situation. She was a 38-year-old woman, always concerned with appearances and what the neighbors would say. "Richard, your mother has become the laughingstock of the entire town," complained Jennifer as soon as they arrived home. "Everyone is talking about her fans." Christopher, who was listening to his parents' conversation, joined the discussion with the innocence of a child. "Dad, but at Grandma's house I can breathe better," said the boy. "Christopher, that's all in your head." "Those fans don't make any difference," replied Richard, not paying much attention to his son. The following Monday, the complaints began to arrive. Mrs. Margaret, the neighbor to Dorothy's right, was the first to speak up. "Dorothy, this noise is unbearable. It sounds like an airplane is landing at your house all the time," said the neighbor, leaning over the fence that separated the backyards. "Margaret, it's only during the day. At night I turn some of them off," tried to explain Dorothy. "Some? You need to turn them all off. This isn't a factory. It's a residential neighborhood," insisted Mrs. Margaret. Dorothy was not shaken by the complaints. She had seen the relief on Christopher's face, and that was all that mattered. During the week, she kept the fans running, testing different combinations to find the best result. On Thursday, Mr. Walter, the neighbor on the left, appeared at Dorothy's gate accompanied by 3 more residents of the street. "Mrs. Dorothy, we've come to talk to you about these fans," said Mr. Walter, trying to maintain a respectful tone. "Go ahead," replied Dorothy, coming out into the yard to receive them. "You can't continue with all this racket. Our wives can't take an afternoon nap anymore. The children can't study properly," explained Mr. Walter. "And there's more," interrupted Mrs. Linda, Mr. Walter's wife. "The whole street's electricity bill has gone up because of this contraption." Dorothy felt her blood boil at the comment. She had worked her whole life as a washerwoman and confectioner to earn her savings, and no one had the right to judge how she spent her own money. "Linda, first of all, it's not a contraption. It's a system I created to help my grandson. Second, your electricity bill has nothing to do with my house," replied Dorothy firmly. "Mrs. Dorothy, but don't you think you're overdoing it?" asked Mr. George, who lived 2 houses down. "George, what I think is that you all should worry more about your own problems," said Dorothy, ending the conversation. The neighbors left, but Dorothy knew it wasn't over. She could feel the disapproving looks every time she left the house and heard the malicious comments when she passed by on the street. Friday night, Richard showed up at Dorothy's house with a serious expression on his face. "Mum, we need to talk," he said, entering the house without waiting for an invitation. "Speak, son," replied Dorothy, who was preparing dinner. "Jennifer is pregnant again," announced Richard abruptly. Dorothy stopped what she was doing and looked at her son with surprise and joy. "Son, what wonderful news!" she exclaimed, moving closer to hug him. "Mom, listen carefully to what I'm going to say," said Richard, keeping his distance. "Jennifer has terrible morning sickness and can't be near noise. If you don't remove those fans, Christopher won't be able to come here on weekends anymore." Dorothy felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Her son's threat hit exactly where she was most vulnerable, her relationship with her grandson. "Richard, you can't do this," she said, her voice choked. "Mum, I don't want to do this." "But Jennifer isn't feeling well, and this constant noise is only making it worse for her," explained Richard, trying to soften his tone. "And what about Christopher? He's doing much better here," Dorothy tried to argue. "Mom, Christopher can be treated with medicine. He doesn't need this." "Contraption," said Richard, looking at the fans with disdain. That night, Dorothy couldn't sleep. She lay listening to the rhythmic sound of the fans and thinking about the dilemma she faced. On one side, the neighbors complaining and her son threatening to stop his son's visits. On the other, the certainty that she had found something that truly helped Christopher. On Saturday morning, the boy arrived as always, running to hug his grandmother. But this time, Jennifer got out of the car and came to the door. "Mrs. Dorothy, I'm coming to pick up Christopher at 2 in the afternoon. The doctor said because of the pregnancy I need to avoid loud noises," said Jennifer, visibly bothered by the sound of the fans. "Jennifer, you can leave him until Sunday like always," Dorothy pleaded. "No, mother-in-law, only until 2, insisted Jennifer, heading back to the car. Christopher sensed the tension in the air but said nothing. He hugged his grandmother, and they went together to the kitchen for coffee. "Grandma, why does everyone complain about your fans?" asked the boy while eating a piece of cornbread. "My dear, sometimes people don't understand the things we do for love," replied Dorothy, stroking her grandson's hair. During the few hours Christopher spent at the house, Dorothy watched carefully how the boy behaved. He played without getting tired, didn't cough once, and didn't need to use the asthma inhaler he always carried in his pocket. At 2 o'clock sharp, Jennifer arrived to pick up the boy. Christopher was visibly sad to have to leave early. "Grandma, next week can I stay until Sunday?" he asked, as his mother pulled him by the hand. Dorothy looked at Jennifer, who shook her head no. "We'll see, my love," replied Dorothy, holding back tears. The following week, things got worse. Mr. Harold, the owner of the electrical supply store, appeared at Dorothy's house on a Tuesday morning. "Mrs. Dorothy, I need to speak with you," he said, looking embarrassed. "Go ahead, Harold," replied Dorothy. "The neighbors are saying they're going to file a petition with the city to force you to remove the fans," explained Mr. Harold. Can they do that? Asked Dorothy, worried. If they can gather enough signatures and if the city considers it's causing a public nuisance, yes, Mr. Harold answered sadly. Dorothy was shaken by the news. She had never gotten into trouble and had always had good relations with the neighbors. The situation was getting out of her control. On Thursday, Mrs. Margaret appeared at Dorothy's gate with a sheet of paper in her hand. "Dorothy, I didn't want to do this, but you forced me," said the neighbor. "What is that, Margaret?" asked Dorothy. "It's a petition asking the city to resolve the fan situation. I already have 15 signatures," informed Mrs. Margaret. "Margaret, please, you don't understand. It's to help my grandson," Dorothy pleaded. "Dorothy, I'm very sorry for your grandson, but this can't go on. The whole neighborhood is being affected," said Mrs. Margaret, walking away. That Friday, Richard arrived at Dorothy's house with news that left her desperate. "Mom, Christopher isn't going to come here on weekends anymore," he announced as soon as he entered. "Son, please don't do this to me," Dorothy begged. "Mom, Jennifer is threatening to leave me if I keep bringing the boy here. She says the noise is bad for her and the baby," explained Richard. "Richard, give me a little more time." "I'll find a way to reduce the noise," Dorothy tried to negotiate. "Mom, it's not just the noise. Everyone in town is saying that you—" Richard hesitated. "That I what?" asked Dorothy. "That you're becoming different. Some people are saying it might be better for you to go live in a retirement home," said Richard, avoiding looking his mother in the eye. Dorothy felt the world collapse around her. The threat of being placed in a retirement home was her greatest fear. "Richard, are you thinking of putting me in a home?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Mom, I don't want that. But if this story with the fans continues, if the neighbors keep complaining, I'll have to make a decision," said Richard, leaving the house without saying goodbye. That night, Dorothy sat in the backyard and looked at the fans running on the roof. For the first time since she had installed them, she considered the possibility of giving up. The price she was paying might be too high. But then she remembered Christopher's face, his joy at playing without getting tired. The whole night he had slept without coughing. How could she give up on something that really worked? On Saturday morning, Dorothy woke up with a decision made. If she could no longer have Christopher at her house, she would go to him. She took a bag with some treats and walked to her son's house. Richard opened the door looking surprised by the morning visit. "Mum, what are you doing here?" he asked. "I came to see my grandson," replied Dorothy simply. "Mum, I already told you that," Richard began, but was interrupted by Christopher, who came running. "Grandma!" shouted the boy, throwing himself into Dorothy's arms. Jennifer appeared in the living room with an unfriendly look. "Mrs. Dorothy, Richard already explained the situation," she said, placing her hands on her still small belly. "Jennifer, I just want to spend a little time with my grandson," Dorothy pleaded. 1 hour, just 1 hour, and without saying anything about those fans, Jennifer imposed. Dorothy agreed and sat with Christopher in the living room. The boy looked paler than usual and coughed a few times during their conversation. "Grandma, when can I come back to your house?" Christopher asked in a low voice, looking at his parents. "Soon, my love," replied Dorothy, avoiding promising something she didn't know if she could keep. During the hour she spent at her son's house, Dorothy noticed that Christopher used his asthma inhaler twice. The contrast with the weekends at her house was stark. When she said goodbye, Christopher held her hand tightly. "Grandma, your fans make me feel better. Don't listen to what others say," he whispered in his grandmother's ear. Dorothy left her son's house heartbroken, but with a renewed certainty. She was on the right path. The following Monday, a city employee appeared at Dorothy's house. "Are you Dorothy Campbell?" asked the man, consulting a clipboard. "That's me," replied Dorothy. "I'm a city inspector. We've received some complaints about disturbing the public peace. Could you show me the equipment?" said the employee. Dorothy took the man to see the fans. He made some notes and took pictures. "Ma'am, the installation needs to be regularized. Do you have a permit for this?" asked the inspector. "A permit?" repeated Dorothy, not understanding. "Yes, ma'am. To install equipment that can cause noise, you need to request authorization from the city," explained the man. "And if I don't have one?" asked Dorothy, already fearing the answer. Then you'll have 15 days to regularize or remove the equipment, informed the inspector, handing Dorothy a paper. After the man left, Dorothy sat in the backyard and cried as she hadn't cried in years. She felt completely alone and without knowing what to do. On Tuesday, an unexpected person knocked on her gate. It was Dr. Henry, a retired doctor who lived 3 blocks away and whom she had known by sight for years. "Mrs. Dorothy Campbell, may I speak with you?" asked the doctor. "Of course, doctor. Please come in," replied Dorothy, surprised by the visit. Dr. Henry was a 70-year-old man with completely white hair and an elegant bearing. He had retired 2 years ago, but was still respected in town as one of the best doctors who had ever practiced there. "Mrs. Dorothy, I heard about the situation with the fans and would like to understand it better," he said, sitting down in the living room. Dorothy told him the whole story, from her grandson's asthma attacks to the threats from the neighbors and the city hall. Dr. Henry listened to everything attentively, asking a few specific questions about Christopher's symptoms. "Could you show me how the system works?" requested the doctor. Dorothy took Dr. Henry to see the fans in operation. He observed everything with scientific interest, paying attention to the airflow and its distribution through the rooms. "Very interesting," he murmured, making mental notes. "Doctor, do you think I'm crazy?" asked Dorothy sincerely. "On the contrary, Mrs. Dorothy, what you've done has a scientific basis," said Dr. Henry, surprising Dorothy. "How so?" she asked. "Forced air circulation can really help people with respiratory problems. It's a principle used in hospital treatments," explained the doctor. "So I'm not just making things up?" asked Dorothy, her eyes shining with hope. "Not at all. In fact, I'd like to propose something," said Dr. Henry. "What is it, doctor?" asked Dorothy. "I want to do a study about your grandson's case. If we can scientifically prove that the system works, perhaps we can solve your problems with the neighbors and the city hall," proposed the doctor. Dorothy immediately accepted the proposal. Finally, someone was taking her idea seriously. Dr. Henry returned to Dorothy's house in the following days, always accompanied by equipment to measure air quality, humidity, and circulation. He took detailed notes on everything. "Mrs. Dorothy, the numbers are impressive," he said one Thursday morning. "The air quality inside your home is superior to that of many doctors' offices." "So I was right?" asked Dorothy. "Completely right. What you've created is a therapeutic ventilation system," confirmed Dr. Henry. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. On Friday, Dr. Henry appeared at Dorothy's house, accompanied by another man, whom he introduced as Dr. Charles, a pulmonologist from the capital. "Dr. Charles has come to see your system," explained Dr. Henry. Dr. Charles was younger, about 50 years old, and was impressed by the ingenuity of the setup. "Mrs. Dorothy, may I ask a few questions about your grandson?" asked Dr. Charles. "Of course, doctor," replied Dorothy. Dr. Charles asked a series of questions about Christopher's symptoms, the medications he used, and how he behaved at his grandmother's house. He also asked to see the fans operating in different configurations. "It's incredible," Dr. Charles commented to Dr. Henry. "She has intuitively created an environment that replicates hospital treatment conditions." "Doctors, does this mean I can keep the fans?" asked Dorothy hopefully. "Mrs. Dorothy, we are going to prepare a medical report proving the therapeutic necessity of the installation. That should resolve your legal problems," assured Dr. Henry. That night, Dorothy slept better than she had in weeks. She finally had hope that things would work out. The following Saturday, Richard showed up at Dorothy's house with a different expression on his face. "Mum, Dr. Henry called me yesterday," he said. "And?" asked Dorothy, trying to decipher her son's expression. "He explained the medical report to me. He said the fans really do help Christopher," said Richard, looking embarrassed. "Son, I always said that," replied Dorothy patiently. "Mum, I'm sorry. I didn't believe you," Richard apologized, lowering his head. "Richard, what's important is that you understand now," said Dorothy, hugging her son. "Jennifer still isn't convinced. She says it could be a coincidence," admitted Richard. "Then bring Christopher over today and let her see with her own eyes," suggested Dorothy. Richard hesitated a bit, but eventually agreed. An hour later, he returned with Christopher and Jennifer. "Mother-in-law, I'm just here to pick up the boy tomorrow," Jennifer said curtly. "That's fine, Jennifer," replied Dorothy, happy to have her grandson back. Christopher spent the whole Saturday playing in the backyard without showing any symptoms. He ran, played ball, and even helped his grandmother tend the garden. That night, Dorothy made his favorite dinner, chicken with okra and cornmeal mush. "Grandma, I slept so well here," Christopher said on Sunday morning. When Jennifer arrived to pick up the boy, even she had to admit he looked better. "Mrs. Dorothy, Christopher really does look like he got some rest," Jennifer acknowledged. "It's the air in the house, Jennifer. The doctors confirmed it works," said Dorothy. "What doctors?" asked Jennifer. Dorothy told her about the doctor's visits and the report they were preparing. Jennifer listened to everything in silence. "Mother-in-law, if it's true that it really helps, I apologize," Jennifer said before leaving. On Monday, Dr. Henry brought the completed medical report. It was a 3-page document explaining the benefits of forced ventilation for asthma patients and recommending the maintenance of the system installed by Dorothy. "Mrs. Dorothy, take this to City Hall," instructed Dr. Henry. "With this report, they can't force you to remove the fans." Dorothy went to City Hall that same afternoon. The same inspector who had visited her house received her at the counter. "Ma'am, do you have any news about the fans?" asked the official. "Yes, I do," replied Dorothy, handing over the medical report. The man read the document carefully, seeming surprised by its contents. "Ma'am, I need to show this to my boss. Can you come back tomorrow?" requested the inspector. "Of course," agreed Dorothy. On Tuesday, when Dorothy returned to City Hall, she was received by the Public Works Secretary himself. "Mrs. Dorothy, we've analyzed the medical report," said the secretary. "The installation is approved, but with one condition." "What condition?" asked Dorothy. "You need to install soundproofing to reduce the noise for the neighbors," explained the secretary. "But that must be expensive," said Dorothy, worried. "We can help with the materials through the city's social assistance program," offered the secretary. Dorothy accepted the proposal immediately. Finally, there was a solution that pleased everyone. The following week, city technicians installed soundproofing panels around the fans. The noise decreased considerably, but the system's efficiency remained the same. Mrs. Margaret was the first neighbor to acknowledge the improvement. "Dorothy, it's much better now," she said, greeting Dorothy on the street again. Gradually, the other neighbors also changed their attitudes. Some even apologized for how they had handled the situation. Richard began bringing Christopher every weekend again. Jennifer, though still a bit wary, no longer objected. "Mom, I need to say something," said Richard one Sunday afternoon. "Go ahead, son," replied Dorothy, who was playing with Christopher in the backyard. "I'm ashamed of how I treated you. You've always been an intelligent woman and I should have trusted you," admitted Richard. "Richard, what matters is that you understand now," said Dorothy, hugging her son. A few weeks later, an unexpected situation changed everything again. Mrs. Elizabeth, a resident of another neighborhood, showed up at Dorothy's house on a Thursday morning. "Mrs. Dorothy, I heard your story through Mrs. Linda, who is my neighbor's cousin," said Mrs. Elizabeth. "Yes, Mrs. Elizabeth." "How can I help you?" asked Dorothy. "It's about my little granddaughter. She has asthma just like your grandson. I wanted to know if you could teach me how to make these fans," requested Mrs. Elizabeth. Dorothy was surprised by the request, but felt flattered that someone recognized the value of her system. "Of course, Mrs. Elizabeth, but first, I'd like you to bring your granddaughter here so I can see if it really works for her," suggested Dorothy. The following Saturday, Mrs. Elizabeth brought her 6-year-old granddaughter, Emily Grace. The girl was having a mild asthma attack and was breathing with difficulty. "Come on in, dear," said Dorothy to the girl. In less than 30 minutes inside the house, Emily Grace was already breathing better. The difference was visible. "My God, it's really true," exclaimed Mrs. Elizabeth, moved. "Yes, it is, Mrs. Elizabeth. Now let's talk about how to set up a system in your home," said Dorothy. Dorothy spent the entire afternoon explaining to Mrs. Elizabeth how she had created the system, what equipment to buy, and how to do the installation. She even drew a simple diagram to make it easier to understand. "Mrs. Dorothy, how much do you charge to teach me this?" asked Mrs. Elizabeth. "Nothing, Mrs. Elizabeth. This isn't something you charge for. It's to help a child," replied Dorothy simply. The news about Dorothy's system began to spread through the town. Soon, other mothers and grandmothers started seeking her out for guidance. Mr. Harold from the electrical supply store noticed an increase in fan sales. "Mrs. Dorothy, you've become a therapeutic ventilation expert," he joked one morning when she went to buy some replacement parts. "Harold, I just wanted to help my grandson," replied Dorothy. "Well, you ended up helping the whole town," said Mr. Harold. Dr. Henry continued monitoring Christopher's case and was impressed by the story's impact. "Mrs. Dorothy, I'd like to propose something," he said during one of his visits. "What is it, Doctor?" asked Dorothy. "How about we create a small community center where other families can bring their children to try therapeutic ventilation," suggested the doctor. "Doctor, but I don't have space for that," said Dorothy. "It doesn't have to be in your home. We can ask the city to provide a space in the neighborhood community center," explained Dr. Henry. The idea excited Dorothy. She had never imagined her creation could help so many people. "Doctor, if you think it can work, I'm in," agreed Dorothy. Dr. Henry spoke with the mayor about the proposal and got approval to use a room in the community center. The city even offered to fund the installation of the fans. Mrs. Patricia, president of the Residents Association, coordinated the organization of the space. "Mrs. Dorothy, you will be our technical consultant," said Mrs. Patricia. "Patricia, I don't know if I have the knowledge for that," said Dorothy, unsure. "Mrs. Dorothy, you've created something that trained doctors hadn't thought of." "Of course you have the knowledge," assured Mrs. Patricia. "The Therapeutic Ventilation Center was inaugurated on a Saturday the following month. The mayor attended, along with several doctors from the city and dozens of interested families. Mrs. Dorothy has created an innovation that will help many families in our city," the mayor spoke during the ceremony. Christopher was present and felt proud seeing his grandmother being honored. "Grandma, you've become famous," said the boy, hugging Dorothy. "Not famous, my love. Just a grandma who loves her grandson very much," she replied, moved. In the first months of operation, the center treated over 50 children with respiratory problems. The results were so positive that they attracted the attention of doctors from neighboring towns. Dr. Paul, a pulmonologist from Charlotte, came to see the center in person. "Mrs. Dorothy, you've created something revolutionary," said the doctor after examining the entire system. "Doctor, I just wanted my grandson to breathe better," replied Dorothy. "Well, you've achieved something that can benefit thousands of children," said Dr. Paul. Dr. Paul proposed documenting Dorothy's method to present at medical conferences. She felt nervous about the idea. "Doctor, I don't know how to speak to important doctors," said Dorothy. "You don't need to speak to anyone. We will document your method and present it on your behalf," reassured Dr. Paul. 6 months after the center's inauguration, Dorothy received an unexpected call. It was from a journalist from New York. "Mrs. Dorothy, I'm a television journalist and would like to do a story about your story," said the woman. "A story about me?" asked Dorothy, surprised. "Yes, ma'am. The story of your creation reached New York through the doctors. We want to show it to all of America," explained the journalist. Dorothy hesitated, but Richard and Dr. Henry convinced her to accept. "Mom, this could help many other children across the country," argued Richard. The television crew came to Palmwood Springs on a Thursday. They filmed Dorothy's house, the community center, and interviewed several families who had benefited. "Mrs. Dorothy, how did you get the idea for the ventilators?" asked the journalist during the interview. "I saw my grandson struggling to breathe and couldn't just sit idly by. I thought if I increased the air circulation it might help," explained Dorothy naturally. "And weren't you afraid of the neighbors' comments?" asked the journalist. "I was. But the love for our children and grandchildren is greater than any fear," replied Dorothy. The story aired on a Sunday night and caused a great stir. The City Hall phone didn't stop ringing with people from all over the country asking for information about the method. "Mrs. Dorothy, you've become known all across America," said the mayor during a visit to her house. "Mayor, that kind of scares me," admitted Dorothy. "No need to be scared. You did something very good and people want to know about it," reassured the mayor. A few weeks later, Dorothy received a visit from someone she didn't expect, Dr. Edward, a retired mechanical engineer who had moved to Palmwood Springs just a few months prior. "Mrs. Dorothy, I came to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Edward, and I live on the back street, said the man. Dr. Edward was a 68-year-old man, a widower, who had retired from a large company in New York and chosen Palmwood Springs to live out his later years. Doctor, you're welcome. Please come in, said Dorothy, offering coffee. Mrs. Dorothy, I saw the story about you on television and was impressed, said Dr. Edward. Why, Doctor? Asked Dorothy. Without any technical knowledge, you created a system that many engineers couldn't design, explained Doctor. Edward, do you think I did the right thing? Asked Dorothy. More than right, it was brilliant, replied Dr. Edward enthusiastically. Dr. Edward began to visit Dorothy regularly. He offered to optimize the ventilation system, making it more efficient and quieter. Mrs. Dorothy, with a few technical modifications, we can improve the system even further, proposed Dr. Edward. Doctor, if you think you can help, I accept, agreed Dorothy. Dr. Edward's visits became frequent, and Dorothy began to await them with anticipation. She felt there was a special connection between them. Dorothy, may I call you by your first name? Asked Dr. Edward one afternoon. Of course, Edward. You don't need to call me Mrs., she replied, blushing slightly. Edward began to help Dorothy not only with technical matters, but also with the correspondence she received from people interested in the method. Dorothy, 15 more letters arrived today, said Edward, organizing the papers on the kitchen table. Edward, I don't know how to answer so many people anymore, admitted Dorothy. How about we create a simple manual explaining how to set up the system? Then we can send it to those who ask, suggested Edward. They spent weeks preparing the manual, with Edward doing the technical drawings and Dorothy explaining the practical details. Edward, thank you for all your help, said Dorothy one afternoon, as they finished reviewing the manual. Dorothy, I'm the one who should thank you. I haven't felt this useful in a long time, replied Edward, looking at her affectionately. Richard noticed the growing closeness between his mother and Edward. Mom, Dr. Edward seems like a good person, he commented one Sunday. Yes, son, he helps me a lot, replied Dorothy. Mom, do you like him? Asked Richard directly. Dorothy was left speechless, blushing like a teenager. Richard, don't talk nonsense, she said, changing the subject. But the truth was that Dorothy was falling in love again at 72. She felt young in Edward's company and admired his intelligence and kindness. Edward was also developing feelings for Dorothy. He admired her strength, determination, and creativity. Dorothy, may I say something personal? Asked Edward one afternoon when they were alone in the backyard. Of course, Edward, replied Dorothy, her heart racing. Since my wife passed away 3 years ago, I haven't felt complete. But by your side I feel alive again, declared Edward. Dorothy was moved by Edward's sincere words. Edward, I also feel something special for you, she admitted. Dorothy, do you think 2 people our age can start over? Asked Edward. Edward, love has no age, replied Dorothy, taking his hand. The relationship between Dorothy and Edward developed naturally. They spent afternoons talking, planning improvements for the community center, and answering letters from people all over the country. Christopher loved Edward from their first meeting. Grandma, your Edward is cool, said the boy during one of the visits. He's not my Edward, said Dorothy, correcting her grandson. But you like him, right, Grandma? Insisted Christopher. Yes, I do, my love, admitted Dorothy. So can he be my borrowed grandpa? Asked Christopher innocently. Edward, who overheard the conversation, was moved by the child's words. It would be an honor to be your borrowed grandpa, said Edward, hugging Christopher. 6 months after the relationship began, Edward made an unexpected proposal. Dorothy, I would like to marry you, he said, during a dinner they had prepared together. Dorothy was surprised and moved. Edward, are you sure? She asked. Absolutely certain. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side, replied Edward with conviction. But what will people say? 2 people our age getting married, questioned Dorothy. Dorothy, if you learned anything from the story of the fans, it's that we shouldn't care what others say when we're doing what's right, argued Edward. Dorothy laughed at the answer and agreed to marry him. Edward, I do accept, she said, kissing him tenderly. The wedding announcement caused a stir in the town. Some people criticized, saying it was a silly old folks thing. Others were moved by the love story. Mom, "I totally support your decision," said Richard. "Edward makes you happy." Jennifer also showed her support. "Mother-in-law, you deserve to be happy," she said. The only people who truly mattered to Dorothy supported her decision, and that was enough. The wedding was scheduled for a spring Saturday. Dorothy decided the ceremony would be in her backyard, under the fans that had changed her life. "Edward, I want to get married where it all began," she said. "Perfect, my love." "Let's decorate the fans with flowers," suggested Edward. During the wedding week, the whole town mobilized to help with the preparations. Dr. Henry offered to be Dorothy's best man, and Mrs. Patricia organized the other women from the Residents' Association to handle the decorations. "Dorothy, you're going to be the most beautiful bride Palmwood Springs has ever seen," said Mrs. Patricia. On the wedding day, Dorothy's house was unrecognizable. The fans were decorated with white ribbons and colorful flowers, creating a unique and moving scene. Christopher was chosen to carry the rings. "Grandma, I'm nervous," said the boy before the ceremony. "We're both nervous, my love," replied Dorothy, fixing her grandson's hair. The ceremony was simple and moving. The town's justice of the peace celebrated the marriage, and over 100 people were present to witness the moment. "Edward, do you promise to love and care for Dorothy for the rest of your life?" asked the judge. "I do," Edward answered firmly. "Dorothy, do you promise to love and care for Edward for the rest of your life?" asked the judge. "I do," replied Dorothy emotionally. When they were declared husband and wife, the fans were turned on simultaneously, creating a gentle breeze that scattered rose petals across the yard. It was a magical moment that no one present would ever forget. "Grandma, now you have a husband again," said Christopher, hugging Dorothy. "And you have a real borrowed grandpa," she replied, looking at Edward with love. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. After the wedding, Dorothy and Edward continued working together at the community center, which had become a reference for the entire region. They received visits from doctors and researchers from various parts of the country. A year after the wedding, news arrived that made Dorothy very happy. She would be a grandmother again. Jennifer had given birth to a girl who was named Hannah. "Grandma, will my little sister need your fans too?" asked Christopher when he met the baby. "Let's hope not, my love, but if she needs them, Grandma will be ready," replied Dorothy. Hannah grew up healthy, with no respiratory problems, but Christopher continued to benefit from the ventilation system whenever he visited his grandmother. "Dorothy, you saved the lives of many children," said Edward one afternoon as they sat in the backyard, watching Christopher play. "Edward, I just did what any grandmother would do for her grandson," Dorothy replied modestly. "Not every grandmother would have your courage and determination," insisted Edward. 2 years after the wedding, Dorothy received an honor she never imagined. She was chosen as Citizen of the Year by the City Council of Palmwood Springs. Mrs. Dorothy Campbell, for your innovative contribution to public health and for being an example of determination and family love, we declare you the exemplary Citizen of the Year, spoke the council president during the ceremony. Dorothy took the stage, moved, with Edward and the whole family present. "I didn't expect to receive this honor," she began. "I just wanted my grandson to breathe better. But if my story can inspire other people to never give up fighting for those they love, then every struggle was worth it." The audience rose in applause. Christopher, now 10 years old and breathing perfectly well, shouted from the middle of the crowd, "That's my grandma!" Dorothy smiled and waved at her grandson, remembering the whole journey since that first Saturday, when he couldn't breathe properly at her house. The Therapeutic Ventilation Community Center continued operating and expanded to other towns in the region. Dorothy and Edward traveled regularly to consult on how to implement the system. "Dorothy, you've become a national expert on therapeutic ventilation," joked Dr. Henry during one of the follow-up visits. "Doctor, I'm still just a grandmother who loves her grandson," she replied, maintaining the simplicity that always characterized her. On her 75th birthday, Dorothy got a surprise party organized by Edward and the whole family. The backyard was packed with people whose lives had been touched by her story. "Grandma, you changed everyone's life here," said Christopher during the toast. "Christopher, the one who changed my life was you. You taught me that love makes us capable of amazing things," replied Dorothy, hugging her grandson. Mrs. Margaret, the neighbor who had complained the most about the ventilators at the beginning, made a point of honoring Dorothy. "Dorothy, I apologize for not understanding from the start what you were doing. You taught us that sometimes the best ideas seem like madness to those who don't have enough love to understand," said the neighbor, moved. The party lasted late into the night, with the ventilators running quietly in the background, reminding everyone where it all began. That night, when everyone had left, Dorothy and Edward sat in the backyard to talk. "Edward, do you regret marrying a woman who fills the house with ventilators?" asked Dorothy jokingly. "Dorothy, I married a woman who moves mountains for love. How could I regret it?" replied Edward, kissing his wife's forehead. "You know what makes me happiest," said Dorothy. "What?" asked Edward. "Seeing Christopher running and playing without getting tired. I remember when he would arrive here breathless and afraid he couldn't breathe," said Dorothy. "And now look at him. A healthy, happy boy," added Edward. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had given up when everyone was against me," reflected Dorothy. "But you didn't give up, and that made all the difference," said Edward. At the end of that special night, Dorothy looked at the ventilators on the roof and smiled. They were still running perfectly, as symbols that true love always finds a way to overcome any obstacle. 5 years after the whole story began, Christopher, now a 13-year-old teenager, wrote a school essay about his grandmother. The title was "The Grandma Who Invented the Wind." In the essay, he told the whole story of the ventilators and ended with a sentence that moved his teacher. "My grandma taught me that when someone you love is suffering, you can't just stand by and watch. You have to act, even if everyone thinks you're crazy." The teacher read the essay to the entire class and asked Christopher to present it at the school's year-end event. On the day of the presentation, Dorothy and Edward were in the front row, proud of their grandson. "Christopher gave me the greatest gift a grandmother can receive, the certainty that our fight was worth it," said Dorothy to Edward during the presentation. After the event, Christopher ran to hug his grandparents. "Grandma, thank you so much for fighting for me," said the boy. "My love, I would fight 1,000 times if I had to," replied Dorothy, emotional. "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to help other children like you helped me," said Christopher. "I'm sure you will, my grandson. You have a big heart just like your grandmother's," said Edward, hugging the boy. That night, back home, Dorothy stopped in the backyard to watch the fans running. Edward approached her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I'm thinking that it was all worth it. Every criticism, every difficulty, every moment of doubt, it was all worth it to see my grandson growing up healthy and happy," replied Dorothy. "And to see how many other children were helped," added Edward. "Yes, that too. But mostly to prove that a grandmother's love can move the world," said Dorothy. "Or at least fill a roof with fans," joked Edward, making Dorothy laugh. "Edward, thank you for coming into my life," said Dorothy. "Dorothy, thank you for showing me that it's never too late to start over, and that true love has no age," replied Edward. They stood there, embraced, listening to the gentle sound of the fans that had become the soundtrack of their lives. It was the sound of determination, of courage, and above all of the unconditional love a grandmother feels for her grandson. Dorothy's story continued to inspire people for many years. The community center expanded to dozens of cities, always with her consultation. Doctors from all over the country began recommending the Dorothy method for patients with respiratory problems. But for Dorothy, the greatest victory remained seeing Christopher growing up strong and healthy, running around the backyard without getting tired, playing with his little sister Hannah, and living the childhood she had always dreamed of for him. The fans kept running day after day, year after year, as a permanent reminder that true love is capable of creating solutions where others only see problems, of finding paths where others only see obstacles, and of turning the impossible into possible when one has a determined heart full of love. And so in the small town of Palmwood Springs, the house with fans on the roof became a symbol of hope for all families facing similar challenges, proving that sometimes the best solutions come not from medical offices or sophisticated labs, but from the heart of a grandmother who refuses to accept that there is nothing to be done. The story of Mrs. Dorothy Campbell was forever etched in the memory of all who knew her, as an example that one person's determination can make a difference in the lives of many others, and that love is always the most powerful fuel for any transformation. End of story. Dear listener, now tell me, what did you think of Mrs. Dorothy's story? Do you know someone with that same determination to help those they love? Leave your honest opinion about this incredible journey of love and overcoming in the comments. And if you have a similar story to share with us, it will be a pleasure to read it. Thank you so much for your company up to this point. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.